I don't know how lightweight rowing is going to be at World Championships now. There is this huge pressure from the IOC. You are like off your head if you're thinking this 2,000 metre sport, no changes. Is, you know, we've got this sport going on, this sport. Kids here, their attention spans like, 3 seconds. Like, what are you doing? I'm not sure how sustainable the sport is. I see that the sport has to show the International Olympic Committee that it is doing evolution. So I think there will be more changes. I think World Rowing is paranoid about making this Olympics at 1500 an exception, because they've got a definition of rowing which includes it as an endurance sport. That's what makes it the sport it is. They've kind of said, well, 1500 on this one occasion, we'll show the IOC we're being flexible. But I think when you make a change, the danger is that actually once you've done it once, then other things can change. That element of the sport that's 2K, I think, won't change. I think the makeup of teams will change.
Yeah, so I guess, again, you said the same thing.
Like, rowing, I'm a rower, so like 85 was... so essentially, Steve was going to single, Andy stopped, Budge stopped, so it was like, what am I going to do? John Beattie stopped, so it's like, what am I going to do? And so I thought I'll row with Richard in a pair. So I rowed with Richard Stanhope in a pair. And we're kind of like going to the dogs for trials. And Penny wanted me to row with Adam Clift. And like Mike Sprackling was, he basically, I remember him sat at the door of the car, and like Richard sat there and Mike's going, well, you're not good enough, as good as Adam Clift. Or what, he's kind of, sometimes Mike can be quite manipulative in that way. So I ended up in a pair with Adam Clift, and we were just like, well, I don't want to fucking row with you. Well, I don't want to row with you. And the pair wasn't going very well. And, I think we got beaten by a Nottingham pair at one regatta in Duisburg. And it was like, oh, this is shit. But we still rowed with each other. And then the thing started to click. And, we went to the Bosban and we beat the other British pair. And then we went to Lucerne and we beat the Olympic silver medalist, the Spanish. The Pimenovs were like 7 seconds in front of us. And then we got, we were training, Steve was in the single. And then we got to the World Championships in Hazelwinkel. And then there was... we were flying in the heat. We used to do like warm up. We were that good. We had this beautiful Stanford wooden pair, and called Lake Casitas, and we used to do warm ups with feet out, before the race, and we'd go up to like 40 strokes a minute. Wow. Feet out. It was just like, this is flying. And semi-final, no problem. We get to the final, and going out on that race, Jim Clark, who was there coaching the Italians, looked at me and said, you can win this, don't you? And I'm like, thought bubble, no, well, because the Pimenovs were beat by 7 seconds. They were like, we're not going to do that. So basically it was like, well, you're wrong. So, because I didn't see myself as a pairs rower, I was like, to win a medal would be amazing. Again, it's this aspirational thing. So in the final, we're going off, we rode really well off the start, we're going really smoothly. The Pimenovs have got a yellow stern, they disappear. I'm like, well, that's fine, because, we're in front of everybody else. And then, we get to 1,000 just by the island in Hazelwinkel. And all of a sudden, this yellow stern, appears next to us. I could sit out the corner of my eye.
Corner of the eye, yeah.
Yeah. And so, anyone would think, oh, we can win this, take them on now. But my thing is, oh, what's that doing there? It's like, and all of a sudden, from being totally inward focus goes out to Pimenov stern, other crews, the water it's a really fast tail, and the water's getting rougher and rougher down the course. It goes to conditions, because I'd seen Andy Sutherth he was leading carping in the last 250 caught crab and lost the gold medal. So it was like that came into my mind. So everything else external, and basically it started tightening up, started not making calls. Adam's screaming at me in the bow seat, and coming into the last 500, the Italians are coming back on us, the Spanish are coming back on us, and then suddenly it was just like, well, the water's really bad. It was like, Pimnell's gone away. It was like, fuck it. Just, I don't know, because Adam was screaming, and we just like took off, like literally, and we just went massively back on the Pimnells, and we basically crossed the line up. And I don't know why, but the photo finish seemed to be like 15 minutes or something ridiculous. And then the result was we'd lost by 0.08 of a second. Yeah. So Jim Clark was right. You could have beaten them.
Yeah.
And I had my silver medal in the pair, but it was 0.08 off the world title.
Yeah.
So we did the pair again next year, came fourth, me and Adam. We actually won in Lucerne, which was one of my best ever races. Like nightmare in '86, nightmare off the start. And we were right at the back of the field. And then at the back, there was Mike Tatey with his partner, John Strockbeck. I remember coming through that bit of Lucerne, just, past 1,000, through the... to where the course comes out, and I remember feeling my legs like I'm really connected on my legs, like I hadn't been, and we just started moving through Tatey, and then we start moving through and there were two East German pairs on the far side, in what would be lanes 5 and 6, racing for selection, and so we're just flying. We're like, we just like moved through the whole field, and then we're coming back on the East Germans. And basically, we beat the two East German pairs by nearly a length. If you look at the film of that, like we're not on it.
Oh right, yeah.
Because we're just out of it. They're just focusing on the East Germans, and then the camera shot pulls out to the finish, and it's like, oh, there's a British boat. So that was amazing. And then we then went into a 4 Commonwealth Games. Me and Ants and Steve and Andy, who were doing the Cox pair that year. So we raced the worlds in the. We raced the Commonwealths in the Cox 4, beat a load of good crews like the Aussies with people. I think it was Jimmy Tompkins in that boat, and the New Zealanders that got silver at the Worlds that year. We beat it, and in that race, because Steve was doing 3 events. He was like Mr. Amazing. He was doing the single, which he beat Peter Anthony and won. He was doing the pair with Andy that they won. He was doing the Cox 4, with me and Ads, and. So, and the New Zealanders, they'd been giving it this, really, I think, I think, was it Chris White in that boat? Probably. But anyway, Steve had sort of taken some offence. Mm-hmm. So we're rowing down. I think we kind of level, and then we sort of moved away. And Steve was like, yeah, what have you got? Come on, fucking show us then. What are you doing? And I'm like, what's he doing? He's like talking to them in the middle of the race. And the water was quite rough, but we basically won the gold medal in the Commonwealths. And, Steve and Andy went on to win an incredible Cox Pairs race that year. Me and Adam did the pair in '86, and then we finished 4th. We shouldn't have done. That was that semi-final that was, probably the hardest race I've ever done, where we worked around very well. Adam and I stayed in the pair. We changed our coach from Sprackling because he was coaching. Andy and Steve decided to double up Cox and Cox's pair. They trashed us that year. We got beat by another pair, Maxie and Garrett. So '87, we went into a Cox 4.
That was the year Brian Armstrong was my coach in 2008 when we got the Thames Cup. He was telling us he was at the start line, and the Cox, they got a false start on Reed Road because they won the Coxless, but they didn't get the Cox.
No.
And he said the first one they went off like an absolute bullet.
Yeah.
And they got someone false started or something and got re-rode, and then the second one it just wasn't the same. And it was like, so close. But I mean, that would have been unbelievable.
Yeah. Well, that year we broke the championship record in the heat. You know, that is my probably best race ever. The heat of Cops 4s, 87 World Championships. It was like flow state. You know, I was absolutely full gas, but not feeling it. And then for some reason in the semi we came second, which basically means we got laid 5. So essentially in Copenhagen there was a crosshead where there's this big old bank, like 200-300 foot high cliffs. So it's completely flat over there in lane 1, and essentially, you know, the Italians had lane 6, they got a bronze medal. The Russians were in lane 5, East Germans were in lane 4, you know. So we missed the medal. But then the reason I'm saying this story is then we stayed in the same 4 to the Seoul Olympics. And we finished 4th in that. You know, I don't have any bad feelings in terms of, you know, East Germans or Russians or anything like that. I kind of feel like East German 4 in 88 won, so they were basically using drugs and stuff. Don't know about the Romanians who came second, but, you know, maybe they were. New Zealanders who finished 3rd probably weren't, you know. So if someone say, do you want an upgrade Olympic medal, I'd say, well, I'd take one from Seoul.
Yeah.
Games was notable for a right. So we used to go so slow. We were last in our heat. The repechage was okay, but the final we were in last place, coming with 500 meters to go, and people like the Russians and the Americans and the Germans, with Roland Barr at stroke actually, or maybe he was in the 2-seat in that crew, famous West German stroke man, 58. And anyway, we were off the back, but suddenly we started to move. It was, you know, it was a bit like Hazelwinkel all over again. And literally we were like maybe 2 lengths there with 5 runs to go, or pretty close to that. And we actually came through and won the whole semi-final, which was like an incredible feeling. You know, the saying on telly, you know, have they qualified? And it was like, the commentator goes, I think they won it.
Nice.
So that was what was memorable about Seoul. And then, you know, it's like you go through like, well, how am I going to stay involved in the sport? Because, you know, I got married the Seoul year. So I'd met Chris and decided to get married, which the crew was really pissed off about. Because, like, where's my focus? You know, the most important thing should be the Olympics. And I'm like, no, my most important thing is my marriage. So I, you know, didn't like that at all. David Tanner, the coach, visited my wife, or to-be wife, in our house where I wasn't there, and said, you know, I don't want this marriage getting in the way of his rowing.
Wow.
I know, it's like...
Wow.
Yeah.
That's unbelievable. But David Tanner getting a bit too involved.
So...
No, that's...
You know, it was a thing that year in Seoul. But we didn't have kids at that time, so, you know, could still row, and was looking to row in 89. And I'd done the Cox 4, so I thought, you know, I'll try sculling. What I should have done was stick with all these youngsters like Tim Foster and Johnny Searle and that lot who were in the 8 that year. But,
Yeah.
I was in a quad that didn't make the finals.
Right.
And then, I think I said at the start of the podcast, you know, 90, I got in a pair with Tim Foster. So, you know, I was back in a boat competing for medals.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's, you know, you can't put your life on hold forever. I don't think, you said, if you're in terms of like decided to row and have that, maybe like, you know, it's a bit different now. And certainly I feel like, you know, when I was rowing, everything else goes on hold. But ultimately, if you're going to have a long career, you can't just not do anything else with your life.
So I was going to ask you, like, now that you've done 3 Olympic campaigns at that point, going for your 4th in Barcelona, did you still feel like the hunger that you wanted to go and achieve possibly like the peak that you've got in LA, or did you just love the sport and you just wanted to find a way to continue?
The latter.
The latter.
that was the motivation.
Yeah. I think Tasmania 90, they'd had this poster of Lake Barrington, which looked fantastic. I remember like doing in Carapira, I was like, I'm definitely going to be there, and that year I was in a four with Pete Mulcairns, Tim Foster at stroke, Matt Penn, and we were just like crushing people. Like, it was just like, we were just amazing. Vincent in a four, like, what was he, 19 and a half, 20, like, that was just great. And then we kind of that year was remarkable for it was an amazing year, like lots of fun. Like, we won in Rotterdam at this 8. They had 16 8s from all over Europe.
Wow.
On the Rhine in Rotterdam, and basically, we jumped the start because they weren't going to pull us back, and we won. We won that race, beat the East Germans, and then we were doing really well in the 4, and then we come to race Henley, and Mulcairns wanted to do an 8 to take on the Germans, but Tanner wouldn't let us. So he said, right, well, I'm going to do a pair with Matthew. So basically, so they did the pair in the goblets, and we were also doubled up in the stewards. So, but not much opposition. So Foster and I did the goblets, and the Austrians beat Pinson and Mulcairns in the semi. We should have raced a semi against Redgrave and Beresford, but Beresford's back was just completely fucked. So they withdrew. So we rode over in the semi, and then we raced the Austrians, and they led us, and then we basically led them by like 2/3 of a length or whatever. And essentially they rode us down on the line and lost by inches. And then it was like... So then Tanner let us do the 8 in Lucerne. So in Lucerne we had, like, Redders was in the 8 because, he wasn't doing anything because Beresford wasn't around. Mulcairns, I think, was stroking. Foster and me were bout pair. And it was us and the Canadians who got the silver, and, and we were going for the line. And, I remember, like, I'm not going to get rode through twice in 1 week. And we beat the Canadians. We were quite quick with 5:20 something, and so that was winning the 8 in Lucerne was pretty epic. But that year was like Foster got an injury. Redgrave wanted to row with Pinson, so basically Tanner made the decision. Okay, so right, if you win this trial, Matt and Steve, you can do the pair. So the trial is against me and Mulcairns at Nottingham, and we'd never rowed together in a pair before. So I think we might have had a paddle that morning. To be fair, Steve and Matt had been out, a few times that week after we came back from the Goodwill Games in Seattle, and there was a whole crowd on the bank, like people on motorbikes, Johnny Hulls, Johnny Searle and that lot, and they were cheering us on because, they didn't mind seeing Steve lose.
Yeah.
And they got us off the start. We came back to, like, I don't know, a canvas or something through the middle, and they edged out to win by a length at the finish. My memory is we were racing finish to start because of conditions.
Right.
So that was Steve and Matt in the pair. So what Tanner did, which was then wrong, was he took Pinson out of the 4, so he weakened the 4 into the pair. He then took Gavin Stewart out of the Cops 4 into R4, which weakened the Cops 4, and he put John Garrett, who'd been injured all season, and back in, so that everyone finished 4th. And Tanner got booted out. So it was again that year. I think we'd had our first child, Natasha. Still thinking I'm going to row on. Worlds were in Vienna. Thinking I'm not going to win a medal. End up in this 8 with Johnny Searle and Greg Searle that I taught at Hampton School, and it was just amazing rowing. And Tim was in the 8. Tim was stroking the 8. People like Johnny Singfield, Richard Phelps, Richard Stan and I, Stan the man and me were bow pair. And Marty Aiken, the Cox, James Cracknell was in it. So we won the Grand here. So the thing around the Grand here was there were 3 crews entered in the Grand. There was us who had a bye to the final, and there was the Canadians and the Russians. So like in my head, I'm like, well, we weren't that fast as an 8 that year. So I'm like, well, we're obviously going to lose to the Canadians, but okay. So anyway, I went home from the Saturday row at Henley in the morning, and and I didn't look at anything. There's no social media and stuff, and it was like, we're doing pre-race talk or something, or paddle, and it was like, so Marty says, so when you're racing the Russians, so I said like, no, Marty, you mean the Canadians? And Marty was, yeah, fuckwit, don't you know the result? Because he was, it was like, the Russians beat the Canadians. It was like, what? All of a sudden it was like, we can win the Grand.
Yeah.
So I hadn't taken any, I'd just taken my kit down. So basically we beat the Russians, won the Grand, giving all this to the press box, future Henley chairman, Richard Phelps, both barrels to the press box. James Cracknell too, who's not a steward, to be fair. Richard Stanhope, who is a steward as well. That Marty then took Cracknell out. So Greg Searle went into that boat, and we went to Vienna and had an absolutely shit first heat. We were off the bat. I think we came in last. Repechage, we were racing people like, if Mike Tatey's American 8, he was bow in that 8, coached by Chris Kozanowski. We had to beat someone. I think that maybe the Germans or Canadians were in that. It was basically, we had to come second. And it was kind of us or the Americans, and we beat the Americans. And then the final, the Romanians were doubling up in the Cox 4, as they tend to do, which kind of helped us, and I think it was probably gold Germany, silver Canada, and then, we weren't far behind in bronze. So it's like, well, I've got a bronze medal again. Which kind of set us up for Olympic year, which kind of, and the initial idea, Foster and I came third in the pairs, everything looked great for Barcelona. Chris and I were expecting our second child that year. It was, let's do a big 8. So we had Mulcair, like we won in the 8 before, and the 8 was just like crap. Just like we went to Cologne, Marty Aiken, we didn't have a proper coach. Marty Aiken was supposed to coach us, but he was with UL, so he wasn't with us. So I had to do the crew chat. You imagine this, British Olympic 8, the bowman, whoever it was, is doing the crew chat because the coach isn't there. So that 8 got broken up. We got put into 4s. The 4s were much better. Like our 4, I think it was Tim Foster, Ben Hunt Davis, me, maybe Jim Walker, and we were flying. But then Tim got injured. We went to Lucerne. I missed the start of a race, and then it was like, oh, you're fucked now because you can't race. They put us back in. We had to do a time the next morning, so that put us in the repechage. We qualified for the semi, but the Finns, who were going for Olympic selection, objected, so we got kicked out. And then he made the pairs. Mark Lees, who was the coach, made the pairs. Greg Raven-Pin, the 2 Searles, and then it basically threw everything up in the air, and we got put in an 8 that was kind of the best that can be said of it. Was we made the final, which was great because it meant sports aid money the next year. I could still carry on rowing, but it was nothing like the pace that we'd had the previous year.
Yeah, Tim spoke about, like the changing the blades halfway through.
Oh, that was like crazy because it was
Yeah.
big blade year. So
Yeah.
essentially we rode the heat with Mac on
Yeah.
and the rep with big blades.
Yeah. Apparently the coach said something like, "Oh, don't worry, we've done some tests. It's practically the same thing. You're not going to feel much
Dave
different."
Lister, who was coaching us there. And that was another thing because essentially Dave Lister, who was our coach, his father ran a stamp shop. So he had to work in the stamp shop. So he couldn't come out to coach us in Silveretta. So it was like Mark Lees had like AIDS or HIV. And, there was a thing about keeping Mark out. So we talked as a crew, and I went to Brian Armstrong and said, right, so basically, we're not going to Silveretta unless we have a dedicated coach. So if Mark Lees will coach us, we'll go. So he said, kind of said no. So I said, well, we're not going. We'll go to Chester on training camp. If you want to deselect us, that's fine. So it was like, okay, So now Mark Lees is going on training camp with us in 92. And, Mark got a cold, like the first or second day up there, and travelled home. So we're there without a coach. And then it's like men down, like Foster goes down, maybe, was it Steve Turner? So like 3 bow sides go down. So we basically had the spare. Then we fly someone out, Cal McLennan, I think, because the next bow side goes down. Then the third bow side goes down. And it's like, there's no one here. We like got our 2K piece to do. So there's this bloke called Derek Drinkwater who towed the boats out, who had started rowing that year. He was like Dodgy Derek. So basically, he was like bowman in the Olympic 8 for our 2K piece. It was just like nightmare. So yeah, that was. I don't think it was British rowing's finest moment.
No, but you still managed to come away from the Barcelona Olympics with a medal.
No,
No,
sixth.
with a sixth place.
Sixth place.
In the end.
We got the 6 in 91, Barcelona.
There you go. That's that's me misremembering now. Yeah. But then, obviously, having started like dabbling with international rowing like in about 78 to then continuing staying at the top, essentially making A finals, obviously at the Olympics for 14 years. You've become one of the veterans of the squad, and you've seen like rowing like really take different shape and training evolve and everything. Like during that time, you said obviously at the start like you weren't even doing much weights, but then during that time you've also probably oversaw the introduction of rowing machines and different styles of training, had a few different coaches. Like how would you say, how did it feel to like see the sport evolve like in the present?
So it's really interesting. Like I get a sense of like evolution now. I think when you're in it, or when I was in it, I'm not sure I saw it as evolution. Which is like there's these things called big blades, or there's these carbon boats, or like Spracklin's got these sort of pyramids and castles and like training program things. It was just things you had to deal with. And I think like the evolution to a national squad, which I spoke about, it was like, again, I don't do change particularly well, so I'm kind of like conservative with a small c, so, I kind of fought against it, but it's so obvious that that's what you should do, have a squad. So in the sense of an evolution, I wasn't particularly aware at the time of things like that. I think also I was, in terms of training program, like Mike Spracklin had these training programs before the Seoul Olympics, which Steve and Andy were on, Steve Redgrave and Andy Holmes. And they were pretty fearsome, and they were based on this notion, the hardest thing you could do was 30 minutes at 30. So that was, piece. And
yeah.
Like the week before you do like 40 minutes at 28. And then the week before that you do 50 minutes at 26, and then the week before that you'd do an hour at 24.
Wow.
You know, and these would be on certain days. So that was kind of like the principle, and it was kind of like, do it competitively, put pressure on the rate and try and hold your length and that sort of stuff. High lactate intensity, really sort of, you know. And yeah, I kind of knew what Mike was about. Mike had kind of invented these on mathematical principles and his own nous. I'm not sure, like, say like Chris Kozlowski looks into all the scientific principles.
Sure.
And, you know, I'm not sure that there was much of a specialist physiologist behind it and that sort of stuff. But I was still like, you know, this is kind of what worked for me, like back in the day. So I wasn't as receptive as I should have been and taking this on board. So like we were with Tanner going up to the 88 Olympics, and, you know, it was like we were doing our own thing. We were training really, really hard, I thought. And then, you know, we got stuffed at Lucerne, and then Sprackling came and said, well, you're not doing our program, so now you're doing our program. We shouldn't have been selected, actually. They should have, because we came 10th at Lucerne. But then we were doing all of Sprackling's program, you know, these 30 minutes. And then, you know, I remember doing it, we were at Nottingham and we do the 30 minutes at 30, and it was like, and then you had like a 500 stroke fartlek session the next day. And then we went back on the Saturday, and then the Sunday we're doing pairs matrix trials at the docks. Well, we were all off in back, you know, me and Adam and John Maxey and John Garrett, and we were all right in pairs, but we were just completely, you know, it was like the training program. So then, you know, Mike pulls the training program out for the Seoul Olympics, and I'm like, you know, shit, this is way too much. Because you always kind of, you missed a taper. Like, I didn't understand, I knew nothing. So I, you know, so I'm like with David Tanner, this program is like ridiculous. It's like, so basically we came off the Sprackling program and did our own thing. So I'm just telling you that as an example, and, you know, everyone ended up fourth apart from Steve and Andy, who got a bronze and a gold. But in terms of evolution, you know, it was like, there wasn't that much sense of, you know, now you do this polarized model and you go and do 25, 30K and, you know, low intensity, and then, you know, you do a few hard bits of stuff. Or I think it was probably like a Tor Nielsen type program that Tanner was doing, that, you know, I did for a lot of my career. And basically you worked hard. So it didn't matter what you were doing. You essentially did hard stuff.
Yeah.
You basically were high on lactate, and that was good.
So how did you protect yourself from injury at that time?
So I think I was blessed with, because I'm not tall, so you know, I had back things, but we used to do like weights. There are pictures of us doing weights in the late 70s. Davey was coaching us, and our backs are like C shapes. We're doing power clean lifts, you know, and like we're not lifting like, you know, there's no like specialist coaches. I think we had good core strength. We didn't do core specific exercises, but, you know, I didn't have a long back. So my back injuries came later. Like I've had a back discectomy in 2008, but obviously I'd stopped rowing since then. So I think I was fortunate. Someone like Tim's got a like odd body shape. He's like got like really, really long legs, and he's got a short, dumpy body. And I think, you know, he had back injuries. I think, but he's quite slender in terms of his frame. But I never had that issue.
And
I understand.
I guess some of it's just luck a little bit, but I guess also, like, certainly, like I said, back in that era, the training was a little bit different. You know, maybe a long time. Obviously, when we first saw the cleavers come in, that was like the kind of rib injury stuff, and all of a sudden people are putting more work through than they've been used to. So in some senses, I think like upping the technology or the knowledge or the training, slightly responsible. I know my own case from when I was coaching. just pushing the program up and then suddenly realizing this point when we started getting a lot more injuries and just seeing, there is, there is a trade-off.
Yeah. Well, to give you an example, like I think particularly like in 91 or maybe in 92, we made a film of this on training camp. But basically, Leander with Jurgen, because he was Leander's coach then, did 20K. Well, we were at Molesey. There was a Molesey-Leander thing there. Like, again, saying we weren't one team. And basically, it was like, well, we do 16K at Molesey, but, we row fucking well. And, we pack it. That's all you need to do. And so we made this film at training camp. It was kind of like at Silveretta, because you got the huts, a bit like a prisoner of war camp. And there was, there was the escape committee, and we were arguing over whether to have a 20K long tunnel to dig our way out of the camp or a 16K long tunnel, like the mountain thing. So, it was just kind of stupid, really, because it was like, well, you were just justifying what you thought was good because that's what you were doing, as opposed to saying, let's try this 20K. It was kind of not a great attitude.
Sure.
Like, so in terms of injuries, if you're doing less Ks, you've got less stress in terms of rib injuries and that sort of stuff.
Less repetitive strain.
Yeah. I certainly think there's also a lot of coaches who do mileage for the sake of mileage, and I think like a really strong switched on 12K is a lot better than a 20 when everyone's just flagging heads down at the end. So 6 of one, half a dozen of the other.
Yeah, and then in what you said about evolution, I guess you don't notice the climb of the mountain until you stop and look back and see the distance that you've climbed through as well.
I think what talking to like coaches like Chris Kulvanovsky, he's like iconic coach, and he was coaching actually last year at the Worlds. He's 80 now or something, but he is so interested and aware in trends and evolutions. That he is like someone who is like looking above it all and saying, what does this mean? Gianni Pastiglione, who is the technical consultant for the Lithuanians, works with the Greeks, formerly Italian coach. I think they tried to get it for Serbia this year, I heard, but the Serbs wouldn't pay him. But basically, he takes a lot of lessons. He's got connections into swimming, like what are they doing, and really looking at trends and evolutions, which, great coaches do. And I think athletes, need to be supportive of that and look at things and how it's evolving. And we psychologically weren't in that space. I mean, I was, the time towards the end of my career, like, it's ridiculous, really. Like 94, which was my last year on the team, we had our third child, Frank, and I'm like, desperately trying to find a way to carry on and be in the international team. I'm like, I'm chairing the British Olympic Association Athletes Commission. I'm chairing the World Rowing Athletes Commission. I'm running the local Labour Party in Hampton. I'm playing the guitar at Folk Mass. I'm writing articles. I've got a full-time job as a teacher, history teacher at Hampton School.
Wow.
It's like stupid in that sense. The team went on training camp somewhere in America. Well, I said to Johnny Singers, I was doing the pair with, I said, basically, let's go. We've got a house in France that we go to all the time. And, there's a lake there, we'll do our training camping on the lake in France. Stupid, really. Should have been out with the team.
Yeah.
But, trying to say, well, I have the family and I need to be with the family and all the rest of it.
I think just the effort of trying to juggle all those things at once is just worthy of respect in and of itself. Many people would just choose one or two things, but not holding on to 5 or 6. Family and international sport and jobs, and
still having the drive and the hunger to keep going at that point is like you said, easy to see why you stayed in the sport so long afterwards.
Oh yeah, well, having all those things means when you get stressed. And I've been stressed and had psychological issues, breakdowns. You basically start dropping balls, and then you start getting more stressed because you're dropping balls, and then you go into having a breakdown. Post my rowing career.
Yeah, I was going to say I've sort of heard you speak about before. So 94 was your last year. Was that because the injuries started to creep in?
So I had a back injury in '95. I was still plotting to be in the team as much as I could.
How old were you at this
38
point?
then. I had this back injury in February. Didn't row until like about a week before the trials. Ended up doing a cox pair with a guy called Richard Manners.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we did trials down here, and Jürgen just came up to me and said, "You're not fast enough. That's it. That's my career over." You know,
That's normally
rather
how it
than
goes.
taking a positive decision, like, okay, I've done enough now, like, I'll step away. Maybe that would have been after the Barcelona game.
I had the exact same conversation with Jürgen in 2014. Basically, sat at Bisham, you're not fast enough.
Yeah.
I kind of seen it coming at the time and been struggling with my time in the team, injuries as well, back and things like that. But yeah, so sort of post that, that's been such a huge part of your life, has been the motivation. You've kept doing it despite all these other things, you know,
Yeah.
Incredible. Like you said, how many plates you're spinning at the same time. And again, we spoke to a lot of athletes who struggled post that. You know, how was that, and what advice maybe would you give someone potentially who might be going through that or have gone through it?
Well, you know, I think for me, I found that the things that made me good in rowing, like very competitive and, you know, really sort of get myself up, turned against myself, could drive me down. So I think understanding yourself is very important. I never kind of went to therapy or anything like that, which I probably could have done with, to get a deeper understanding of what was going on for me, and why I was, you know, say desperate. I think there was an element of desperation about, you know, clinging on to the international rowing. I thought I was, inverted commas, all right because I had a job. I was a teacher, and I'd been working all the way through. I was a full-time teacher all the time. I was 18 years on the senior team, and you know, I thought I was all right because I had a job. But I think dealing with stresses and strains, one of which was coming out of rowing, others of which involved being in terms of school and stuff happening with the job, others of which were kind of financial, dealing with that. I think, you know, without the tools to deal with them, because I didn't really understand myself. So there's this thing around self-knowledge and self-awareness. I didn't really talk about this. I didn't talk about it to Chris, my partner. I certainly didn't really talk about it that much to rowers. I didn't talk about it to a professional person, and I'd advise talking about it and being open and honest. You know, we really tried when I was running the BOA Athletes Commission. We actually got a guy employed, a bloke called Scott Naden. So the BOA paid for him. He was competitors' employment officer, to try and find jobs and work for people, you know, that could sustain their rowing. So we tried to approach it through that. In terms of, I guess a lot of the rowers, you know, if they've been through Oxbridge or something, they got degrees, you know, they think, well, okay, there's something there for me afterwards. I'm gonna find something, or whether that's coaching or whether that's anything else. But it's a big, massive change. And I remember Alex doing an interview with Alex Partridge, and he's basically going, you know, you're out of the team with that big fucking metal door at Caversham clang shut behind you, and you're kind of out of it, and you know you're on your own. So I would have thought, you know, I had a very supportive wife, all that stuff behind me, and I still crashed and burned. And maybe I think being more self-aware and being able to talk about things more with others, professional people, might have helped.
Yeah, definitely. I think, you know, it's something that's come up a lot with other athletes that we spoke to, and like having spoke to Alex and him being so vocal on the podcast about it, has meant that other athletes we've spoke to have said to us off camera that they felt a lot happier to talk about these things because it's like no one does.
Yeah.
And certainly, again, we've discussed this before, but in the sport of rowing, your friends are your direct competitors, and that you can't at times sort of say, I'm really struggling here because you've got seat racing next week and they're going to use that against you, or you might even just feel that they use that against you even if they wouldn't. So it's a difficult dynamic, but I agree with you, like finding people maybe outside the sport. Or I also know, like when I finished, there's a few charities that work with certain sports and you can get hold of free therapy. There's one, I'll see if I can put the link on this video, there's one that I got some help with that's supported by the BOA, so that you don't need to spend money to do it either. But sometimes it's just as simple as going and talking to a mate, and as men, we're probably pretty bad at this in general.
Yeah. Increasingly, I think it's an issue, not just for men, but also for women.
Sure.
In terms of where they go and what they do with the sport. But yeah, it's, and you hear things around, what are you, 31, 32 coming out of the sport, and you're trying to get an internship and you're being told what to do by snotty 23-year-olds, and you think, well, I'm used to being in
the best of the world at something.
Yeah. It's a big learning curve. I think someone that's done really well is someone like Steve Robotham, who really went into quite a tough business, I think selling advertising for airline flights or something like that. And I think he's really made that his own. Really impressed with what Steve Robotham has done. I think Mosby, he's, got a really interesting profile, gone into, I know he kind of struggled with whether he should row or not post-Tokyo, but he got this internship and, he looks to be doing well with that. Jess Eddy's got into the same company now. She's moved out of what she was doing as a curator at the Victoria and Albert Museum.
Yeah, there's certainly life after rowing, definitely.
Yeah.
And so on that point, obviously the next huge part and what most people know you for is the commentating. How did that sort of come about post career, or was that sort of overlapped at all?
Well, I think because rowing becomes part of you, and also you love talking about rowing, so there used to be a magazine called Rowing Magazine, which Ailings, the boat builder and the oar makers, used to run. So Richard used to get me to write articles. So I would do like articles for Rowing Magazine. And so I think that, and like for the 88 Olympics, a journalist called John Goodbody got me to write a big piece for the Times or Sunday Times about, the Olympics and that kind of stuff. So I think getting involved with writing or something was that. And then there's the notion, so how am I going to be involved with international rowing now? So I was on the World Rowing Council as an athlete thing. I was actually on World Rowing Council as a council member, as chair of the Athletes Commission. And, Five Live used to do stuff. So 95, I was like, I'll just phone them up and ask them, which is not I'm not very good at marketing myself, really. I should be a lot better than I am. But I did phone up Five Live, and they were kind of like, yeah, all right, we'll take it. We'll take a report from you from the World Cup in Switzerland. Don't know if it was World Cup then. And so I was out at 95, and basically they gave me a phone number. They said you could ring in your report. And so I spent the whole of the regatta just stressing big time about what I was going to write. And it was just like ridiculous because I was literally missing races. And then I went to read this report. Like I had to queue up a public phone box, like put big Swiss 5 franc coins in, and then got through to the thing. And it's like, oh, Marty, they weren't really interested. I don't think it would have got on even. 45-second report, and I started reading it in a very flat voice. And the woman at the end said, so we can't accept that because, you sound too miserable. So I was like, so she said, try. All right, try. I said that's my first time. Try doing it again, and smile when you're doing it. So I did it again anyway. I never knew if it got on, but clearly it was a year before the Olympics, and Five Live were going to focus on rowing because of Steve Redgrave and Matt Pitt. So they put their top soccer commentator, a bloke called Alan Green, as their radio commentator. So, and they said, right, so you're going to be with Alan Green. So your job is to go out to Atlanta. So almost everything I learned from Alan Green. So these reports, like at the end of regattas, Alan would just if he watched a regatta and then he'd just go, like literally no more than three minutes. And it'd sound great. And his intonation and the way he did it was brilliant. And then, we would at Lucerne and we were going around the various sports and, they went to the athletics and it was like, Princess so-and-so's here and, or the Duchess of Kent, and then went to the equestrian and it's like Princess Anne's here. And then comes to Greenie and he's like, and he kind of looks over my shoulder like this at the back of the grandstand in Lucerne and comes back and said, I can tell you there's no duchesses here at all. And then does his report. And I asked him, Cedric, why did you look round? And he said, that way you get the pause exactly right. So I think looking at Greenie, about how to broadcast, and Five Live giving me the opportunity in terms of working with Alan's, because they then used to send, they don't send people out now. So the opportunity as such isn't there. And there were the odd occasions when World Rowing used to make a DVD, because you'd done commentary, like David Goldstrom, who was then a commentator, he would say, so in 1990, after Tasmania, he said, could you come and commentate with it? Because normally Dan Topolsky did it, and I don't think Dan could do it then. So he said, could you come and commentate on the DVD? So I was commentating on myself. It was just like ludicrous. But, it was after the event, and coaches used to buy the DVD. So I kind of got into doing commentary. And then 99, Grandstands, BBC Grandstand as it then was, said, we want you to do TV, want you to do. Gary Herbert was quite vocal about wanting to do it with me. So I did the Worlds in 99 for BBC on TV, and plans to go to Sydney, and then had a big breakdown in 2000. Had to build back up again, and got into Five Live a bit in the sort of 2000. By then I had written my book, Olympic Obsession, which gave me a bit of sort of credibility in terms of, having something there. Five Live took me so I went to Athens again as a Five Live reporter, working with Greenie. Loved that because it was like being back at the Olympics again. Fantastic experience. Gary Herbert and I did a show for Five Live in the run-up to the Athens Games, where we got to go and interview, I did. I went in the ring with Amir Khan.
Oh, wow.
I was doing pad work with his trainers, never believed the speed of his hands. Beth Tweddle, I went to see her do her stuff and interviewed her. It's called Olympic Odyssey. It's a great show. So did that. 2008, Five Live asked me to the Beijing Games, and they asked me to do canoeing as well. And that was the first time. So I commentated on gold medals with Greenie, but that was the first time I commentated on Olympic gold medal myself, with Tim Brabants.
Okay, yeah.
In the K1 1000 in Beijing. And then there was this thing, World Rowing would, Topolsky was doing the BBC. I think, World Rowing were doing live coverage, and it was kind of like I was involved with Goldstrom doing World Rowing, and Five Live were getting less and less and less involved. In 2010, Sky TV were looking for someone in New Zealand to do commentary for them, and Eric Murray was the New Zealand rower, said he could do it. So me and Dave Goldstrom did not only World Rowing but Sky TV for New Zealand. And so you kind of get, Goldstrom was a great person to work with, really good. So you kind of get used to, stuff. Greg Searle, I got him along in 2009 because I had to do, in Poznan I was working with 5 Live, couldn't do World Rowing commentary. I was working with Nick Mullins, who now does rugby, lovely guy to work with. Learned a load of lessons from him. And so I got Greg involved. And so Greg and I are on the scene again, like, love it. Greg's loving being with the athletes. And, we kind of borrowed this boat to go for a paddle at Munich, the World Cup there. And, like all the rowers, like his top chops waving to Greg, like, hi, Greg, and Olaf Tufte. And, Greg's the celeb, I'm not. And Greg's loving it, and he kind of it's at 2009 after the Worlds, like his flight's delayed, and that's kind of when he thought, right, I'm thinking I'm going to go back into this sport. So
that was your fault.
Yeah, 5 Live elbowed me off the commentary for the 2012 games, but I was kind of there as an interviewer for the rowing, did commentary for canoeing. Got another gold medal with Boom Boom, what's his name? Britain's latest Olympic Superman. It'll come to me. 200 metre sprint. Kayaker. Oh my God. I can see him now. Name will come to me.
I was going to ask, so obviously when you said with the canoeing, so initially, I know you said you're sort of a bit of a student of rowing. Did you always have an interest in like rowing as a whole and all the other countries and things like that? Or when you started commentating, was that something you had to like work on? And then certainly, I guess, when coming into kayaking, was that difficult to then kind of...
Yeah, so the thing with me and rowing, it used to really piss people off, is if I took the blades down from the boathouse, I would be like ages getting back, because I would know people.
Yeah.
So,
it's like getting around at Henley Regatta.
Yeah. I had this relationship with, someone like Alf Hansen. You'd meet Alf Hansen in Grunau in 84, and he'd go like, because I hadn't talked to him before, and then, so I'm mates with Alf Hansen, and then you're basically being invited to parties that Alf Hansen would have, and then obviously the Pimenovs were part of that. So I got this whole like Russian friendship with the Pimenovs and other members of the Russian team that I'm still friendly with as coaches, like Nick Chiprina, the coach of the Ukrainian team, was part of that group. Yuri Pimenov sadly died, but his son Nick is now rowing for Serbia. So just recorded he's just got married to a Russian Olympic medalist, and recorded a message of his wedding. So
awesome.
Had a real thing going with the Canadian team, mostly the women. Mike Tating, the Americans. So, used to spend ages talking to Mike and chat. So basically, I was so immersed in international rowing in terms of speaking to people, that was what I did. So I've never had the thing of being, someone like Steve was very focused. So Steve would take the blades down and he'd come back and he'd be like really focused. And I've never been like that. So I've always had that sense of international rowing. But I think in terms of the commentary, you have to work very hard. If you're going to do international rowing commentary, so I feel I have to work really hard each regatta to find out everything I can about each athlete, like 95% of which you don't use. But someone's got to have the background there. Not everybody does that, but somebody on the team has got to do it. So with the canoeing, again, it's fine doing it for 5 Live because you're commentating on for 5 Live the British races. But when I did it in Tokyo for the Olympics, you're commentating for the world because you don't know who in the world's taking your feed. So canoeing doesn't have anything like a data. So I created for myself, which took bloody ages, a database for Olympic canoeists. because the one they give you in the Olympics to use, you press on this button and you get to this, and you press on this button, you get to this, and then you press on another button. So 3 button presses, wait. Well, if you're trying to use anything in commentary, you're just fucked. The times, it's gone,
I always wondered about that, because when you go to Worlds, they make you fill a little form in, and I sort of wondered whether you had like access to it, like exactly what you just said. It's like, yes, but not really. So you got to kind of go and do your own work.
Yeah, well, you've got World Road Database, which they put out as an Excel spreadsheet, which I do a lot of work on. And then recently they've started athletes' forms. So I would say, 15% of athletes fill a form in, maybe 20.
Yeah.
So then you've got to use it. So but you can't use that as a separate form, because you can only work off one thing.
Yeah.
So then you have to put that information into your form, the thing you're using, to see if you might use it. So that's quite a lot of work.
Then you come down to the Henley Royal Regatta, and then you've got to learn about like who's going strong in the PE and this and that. And
that Henley is another challenge, and I'm blessed to be with an amazing team of commentators run by Sarah Winklis, and people do lots of work because I am normally at World Cup, so I'm not on the domestic scene, so I haven't been to Marlow or the Met or Walligate. That I'm coming into it cold, but like someone like Tom Morgan does a great job and Henley now has a database. But essentially, I'm doing a lot of prep because there's more commentators at Henley. You've basically got less races to do to prep, but I'm normally on in the afternoon, so I'll spend about 4 or 5 hours prepping. And
does that just involve as well also going and trying to find the people to talk to?
Well, it does. So
running away from?
In the early years, so when they first started Henley, I was doing the press office. Caroline Searle was the Henley press officer then, and I would be doing stories for her.
Yeah.
So I'd be going all around the boat tanks and talking to people, which is kind of what I should be doing. And then it was the first year Henley was on television, and so I'm doing press office and that. So I'm like completely doing too much over here. And then Matt Pinn comes to me with Neil Trigani and said, we want you to do all the finals on Sunday. Like, I don't know how many finals there are at Henley, 20 or something. And I'm like, wow. And he said, you're knocking it out of the park. We think you'd be really good. And I'm like, I was just gobsmacked. And they said, well, what do you want? And then I was like, well, I'm supposed to be working for Caroline Searle, so I don't think I can do that. It was an issue for me. It wasn't an issue for them.
Yeah.
I'll blow that one off. That was like a massive challenge. But now Henley's getting itself sorted, and you've got like someone like Matt Britton, I think, is fantastic. Sarah Cook from Australia. Greg Searle, moved from commentating onto analysis. He's just like amazing. Greg's a very touchy-feely commentator, so he's not so much into work, although he knows more than he lets on. I think someone who's just brilliant is Camilla Hadlin-Horrocks. She's like going to be massive in this sport in terms of commentary. She's so knowledgeable. She's connected with so many of the current team. She's really, really strong.
Yeah, and then Henley also brings guest commentators each year. You've had Grace Prendergast on, commentating on last year's races, and I think that they're doing more to bring more international.
Yeah. Well, that was interesting how that happened. So basically, so I got into trouble for this. So Greg and I, we're loving it at the Europeans last year in Bled. What a place to go. And we're kind of let's not get down there too early. We'll have a coffee, and then, maybe we want... And the start is right by the town, so you're just taking it all in. And, we're on a little bit of grass and by the path, and we're watching. And Imo's there, Imogen Grant. It's and so, we kind of always this thing of athletes don't really want to talk to you, so you're kind of very over respectful in a way, and then you kind of think, all right, stop talking with her. I think Emily came up and then left, but Imo's just like a rowing junkie. She's just like watching everything. And then you're talking to her, and then you kind of think, and then it's like, oh, she, you know, she really knows a lot. And then you think, right, I'll just, because I'm doing commentary, so, and then she's going, oh, so-and-so's injured here, and so-and-so there, and so-and-so. So I'm like, oh, wow. So it's like, you know, oh, you'd be really good commentary. And it's kind of like, oh, yeah, I'd love to do it, because basically they're finished on the Saturday or something. So I'm like, oh, well, you know, maybe on Sunday, you know, have a think about it or whatever. So basically, I think we were communicating on DMs on Twitter. So it's like, you know, Sunday comes and it's like, what about the commentary from Imo? It's like, oh, right. So I say to Greg, like, Imogen thinks, you know. So he said, what is it? So I said, yeah, let's go. Because we have had people on, like at Lucerne, sometimes we work with Hamish Bond, he came in. I think we worked with Olaf Tufte, Michael Schmidt, the Swiss sculler. So it's not like it hadn't had precedent. But basically, Greg and I decided, we didn't talk to anyone in World Rowing. We basically said, you know, yeah, come in. So she was great, smashed it. And we kept her on for 2 or 3 or 4 races. Anyway, I got a bollocking from a person in World Rowing for not asking. But other people in World Rowing loved it, and you know, rightly so, because she was great. So I kind of said to Sarah, you know, Imogen Grant was really good. And then I don't know whether I think I gave Sarah Imogen's phone number, but basically Imogen was like, yeah, I'll do a commentary stint at Henley. So she'd done her training in the morning, so she came up to the regatta last year and she did a commentary stint. You know, so she just loves it. And she's so aware of everything. She'd be a great commentator.
Yeah, she's incredibly intelligent and switched on. Like we've had her on the show a couple of months ago, or little bit longer than that. But no, she was fantastic. And like you said, exactly a walking rowing encyclopedia.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, also speaking of lightweight rowing, it might be worth asking the question, sort of your opinion on obviously the loss of, or this being the last lightweight rowing. Also, what do you think about beach sprints and that kind of shift?
Yeah, so I don't know enough about the dynamics of the sport to really make, in terms of what beach sprint's going to do, because I feel for lightweight rowing not being in the Olympics.
Of course.
And that having been said, I was probably seen as anti-lightweight in as much as I was running the Athletes Commission, and when they made the decision to put lightweights in, around about the 92 Olympics, you know, I was like, no lightweights in the Olympics, like kicking out the Cops 4, that's my Olympic event, and the Cops pair, you know, what are you doing?
Yeah.
So I think I felt, you know, sorry to miss the lightweight 4 when, you know, it ended in Atlanta. I don't know how lightweight rowing is going to be at World Championships now. It's a thing in our sport, like particularly big in America, much more so than it is, I think, here. So I'd really miss it. I will miss it, and I think shed some tears. The thing around beach sprints was that you clearly got something that's very exciting. It fits with Los Angeles and the whole beach vibe where the rowing's going to be there.
Very inclusive.
You know, Thomas Bach he came to rowing when we were in Munich at the European Championships? I think he was there, and he's basically telling rowing, you know, you are like off your head if you're thinking this 2,000 metre sport, no changes. Is, you know, we've got this sport going on, this sport, kids here, their attention spans like, you know, 3 seconds. Like, what are you doing? So there is this huge pressure from the IOC that are putting in these sports, you know, like T20 cricket, the money that's going to bring in the IOC. Well, you know, I don't know, rowing brings in a lot of money to the IOC, but, you know, that's bringing in, I don't know, $500 million, was it, in TV rights or something like that?
Yeah.
So there's this pressure. So beach sprints fits the bill of a new event, which is potentially exciting. And I see that the sport has to show the International Olympic Committee that it is doing evolution.
Exactly.
So, and it can't do that with lightweight rowing. So I think if the sport is going to move forward in the Olympics, and John Christopher Hollande, the president of World Rowing, he's very like, it must do, that beach rowing is like a massive part of the story rowing's telling about we are looking at things and being vibrant. To be quite honest, I think rowing, you know, the viability of the program now, given what's the numbers around 512 or whatever, you know, and so you only have 7/8 because of the number, which is a real issue in our sport. Well, you know, if you cut the numbers down, you know, so there's loads of male and female single scullers, but that's universality there. And rowing needs to say, look, we've got a lot of different nations. So, you know, can you cut that? And so I think, you know, the next numbers cut when the IOC looks to put new events in, it's basically how viable is our current program.
Yeah.
And that means, you know, running like a week's regatta, you know, with heats and repêchages and semis in some events. And I think what's going to happen is the numbers pressure will go down and down and down. So I think people are already talking about privately around, you know, so where's the new thing? So, you know, I have heard people in, you know, positions that need to think about this, talking about things, what about mixed eights? What about, you know, doubling up events? You know, rowing and sculling big boats, which has been a thing for many years. Tor Nielsen used to talk about that. I kind of was, at the time, against it because it would mean, you know, being with a British hat on, you know, the British A, you want people, or the American team, you want people in your eighth, but I'm not sure how sustainable the sport is. So I think there will be more changes. I'd love to see mixed eights, personally. I think they do it in the Pan Am Games.
Did it in
Ed McKeever, that's the canoeist's name.
Oh, there you go. It's come. It did come back.
Yes.
I did it in 2014 in the Commonwealth Regatta. It's obviously not part of the Commonwealth anymore, but we did a mixed eight at the end, and that was bloody good fun. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I agree with you as well completely. I think
That's exactly what you've been saying for the last few months.
adapt or die sort of thing. You know, it's not very inclusive. Things like beach sprint, you don't have to bring equipment. You know, it's so much easier for smaller nations to get involved in. It sucks that lightweight racing is going because it was just so fun to watch. But interestingly, again, when we had Imogen on, I really want to ask this question. I was like, okay, so lightweight rowing's finishing, but sort of power to weight ratio has been huge in recent times. The age of the 120 kilo guy is over. You know, you've got people like Matt Gottrell that, like, I don't even think it was 90 kilos maybe when he was wet, winning gold in the A. Imogen and Emily have got the fourth fastest overall women's double time ever.
That's crazy.
Could you see a situation where where a lightweights will have a go? And she was like, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. That would be the exciting thing to actually see, like, because as well, again, as an athlete myself, certainly I can remember as under 23 thinking, I'm glad he's lightweight because I can't beat him in a single.
Well, yeah, like we were talking to her, Bled at the Euros, and she was like, well, you know, I don't know what I'm going to do, Podium Harris. You know, she was quite open about, you know, I could go open weight, I could be a doctor, I could do some commentary. You know, the woman's got options. And as a lightweight, she's competed and beaten so many heavyweight athletes. I would see her as being part of a crew. It's interesting, actually. A former lightweight, the Dutch have just selected is Martijn Veldhuis, the Dutch lightweight sculler, because they don't have anyone to make a lightweight women's double, but Veldhuis is a fast sculler, so she's not, you know, she's not lightweight now, but they've put her in a double for the Olympics with Laser Chainard. I think it was in that double. Look, did they get bronze in Tokyo? But basically, that's the Dutch double now with Martijn in. So
yeah, I mean, you see there'll be a lot of lightweights really artificially keeping their weight down. You know, I rode with Chris Body when he came out of international lightweight, came down here and did the ladies plate 8. So he's internationally racing at under 75, but go on a weights program and start eating properly, all of a sudden he's closing on 85, maybe 82, something like that. So, yeah.
So then I was just going to ask, like, obviously with changes being like made into the sport and the sport needing to show some form of evolution, do you see rowing being kept at 1500, or possibly do you see any other events being cut down? Like we already like spoke about 8s and everything, because in order to run a program for an 8 for a country, it takes a lot of resource, and it's a lot harder than just taking a double, for example.
So I think JC is paranoid. I mean, he works his arse off, John Christopher, the president of FISA. But I think World Rowing is paranoid about making, this Olympics at 1500 an exception. That, he's paranoid it won't become a precedent. The rowing's like, well, 1 at 1,000, not 500, because it's dead cheap. Like basically the rowing course is really expensive. So the notion that none of the regattas in 2028 are going to be 1,500 meters apart from the Olympics, I mean, to me, seems fucking crazy.
Yeah.
Like regattas need to be 1,500 meters, but he doesn't want, and World Rowing don't want the 2,000 meters, because they've got a definition of rowing which includes it as an endurance sport. That's what makes it the sport it is. So basically, you have to race over a certain distance. So they've kind of said, well, 1,500 on this one occasion, we'll show the IOC we're being flexible. But I think when you make a change, the danger is that actually, once you've done it once, then other things can change. To me, the sense of making a change for the venue and the cost is very understandable. I think most Olympics, it's supposed to be in Brisbane, but they're having financial issues. But I think there's a 2K course in Brisbane. Brisbane's not going to say we do 1,500 metres. Don't know where it'll be after that, but that element of the sport that's 2K, I think, won't change. I think the makeup of teams will change. I think we'll have teams that the 8 will be a doubling up boat. The quad will be a doubling up boat. I think that's what will change. You'll get higher profile athletes going for, I know we have, who is it? Simona Radis. She got 2 golds, didn't she? Within an hour of each other at the 2022 World Championships, winning the double sculls, at stroke in the double sculls with Bodnar, and then she stroked the Romanian 8 to a gold an hour later.
Ridiculous.
So I think, maybe we can get high profile athletes. I mean, if you said to you, well, who are the stars in the sport now? Well, there are very few. I mean, you might say, right, so Paul O'Donovan, like massive in terms of the sport, but he flies under the radar, like, doesn't really want to do interviews, and he does interviews and he takes the piss. Ollie Zeidler.
Yeah.
Okay, the Sinkovich brothers. But then you're going outside of that, and even someone like Caroline Florijn, she's like, even in the Netherlands, she's just got this gold award, the Golden Skulls, hasn't she? But she's not really like a megastar. Even Simona, who's like world's #1 top woman, it's like, who's Simona Radis? She speaks fantastic English. So we lack superstars. Murray and Bond were obviously in their time. Redgrave and Pinsent, Cracknell was kind of there. But I think we need to have global figures. Perhaps doubling up in the games will bring, athletes that can do that.
And also advertising and possibly like playing better at the social media game from World Rowing side, using more technology to sort of like push the sport out to more people. Hopefully this is what can also create some superstars.
Yeah, well, I think this is why, like if Paul O'Donovan was running an Instagram feed, which I don't think he is, he would have loads of followers outside the sport. like who else would be running an Instagram feed with followers outside the sport?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Sinkovic is probably in Croatia and around about that area. So
I mean, Andre Sinek was on cereal boxes. Tom was telling like, what?
Yeah, but you know, this is a country of 10 million people. They don't have that many Olympians, so it's easier to stick your name in your own country, but to go worldwide is a different story.
You know,
Very
Olaf Tuft, loads of Norwegians will have him, but our Rumen is as he said, he might come back because a Rumen is making a bid for the 20-something World Rowing Championships, 326 or 27. It's like, you know, so maybe he might have a following outside the sport in Norway. But, you know, you try to think of athletes that would be followed for what they are outside the sport, and that there isn't them. So, you know, someone like Nicky van Sprang, who's great on internet and social media, I don't know whether he tones it down a bit now because the Dutch team are sort of, you know, a little bit more focused. But Nicky's great on Instagram.
Yeah.
I think one of the best rowers in terms of pushing things out there. I think the Sinkovics are great on Instagram. I kind of think, you know, certain athletes don't want to do that. You can kind of understand it, but
Got their focus, yeah.
it's like the British team at the moment. I mean, you know, the British team just don't have information out there. You know, I don't know what did they do trials and they kind of like they said didn't put out the results. It was like I think they said so and so has won or something. You never knew who came second or third.
They don't speak a lot about it. I think they had a lot of illness and injury, so they sort of said like, okay, because that was initially going to be the first sort of cut made from those results, but then no, they said they're going to do another one now at the beginning of this year because there was a lot of people absent.
Yeah, I think also like people don't really like know too much about like the rowing stories of certain athletes, and the sport needs to get promoted, which is another part of the reason why we're doing the podcast and trying to like share those stories out to the wider audience and hopefully attract people from outside the sport because to also like look into this.
I really loved in 2013 I was in it, but when they were running final trials at Dorney, and so it was final Olympic trials for 2012 was it when they ran it at Dorney? And they sold tickets and people could actually go and see the rowers row, and then David brought it back into just behind closed door at Caversham, and it's difficult to make money. It's different, you know, if you're a sponsor for the team. You know, when do the British people get a chance to go and see them race?
They did that for cost reasons. I think there's an element of also doing it for control reasons, but in a sense they are so tight about control. You know.
Yeah, if it's a Dorney.
In terms of the expression, like it's ridiculous. I think I can't remember what it was. Rachel Quarrell, God bless. You know, she's like does work so hard, but you know she wasn't given access to go and look at the trials. And okay, so they do things with a coach. One of their coaches doing a little bit of filming and the rest of it now, but you know that's so constrained for Space Caversham. But you kind of get the sense that they don't want it to be public.
No, definitely not.
They prefer it to be like controlled by them, and that's a great shame because, like you say, you know, we'd all go and watch final.
Yeah. I was at Caversham the week before last on tomorrow. Some of the coaches won't even share their results between coaches at Caversham, let alone let those numbers get any further out. So I can understand it. You know, there's a sense of keeping hold of things, especially in an Olympic year.
I love it when, you know, Van Dorp was like, did that world's best on, was it the 2K?
Yeah.
RP3. It was like, you know, it was out there.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, what are you going to do about it if it's the best?
No, but the thing is, you've now got this, you know, thing between Van Dorp and Ollie Seidler. And, you know, they respect each other. You know, it's like what Eric Murray said to me, like, well, basically, because they used to put their scores out. And then he said, well, you know, if I put my scores out and if someone's motivated by that, great, and they put a score in, well, then I'm going to be motivated to beat it.
Yeah.
And that's how it works.
Yeah.
And I think with the British system, you got into a bit of trouble with Mo because Mo put out a thing. I did a blog on it called #NoSliders. He just put #NoSliders.
Yeah.
And basically, he broken a record and it wasn't on sliders.
Yeah.
I think it was maybe on the 5K.
Yeah.
But he couldn't say what, because they kind of had this omerta, like, we won't say what it was. And my take was, look at what Eric's Murray and Hamish Bond are doing, and this is good for the sport. The other thing, I can understand it, but it's not. And Mo, fair enough, got really annoyed about it. But that's just like point of view.
I remember I was up the mountains in Nevada one camp, and the Polish team were out there at the same time. And when we finished, each erg we finished with just a UTT ergo. Jürgen would go around and spike the reset button in the back of every monitor, so that no one could even see a UTT or anything.
Yeah, the Polish team did the indoor championships. They all did it. Could see someone like Matty Bigsup he was world champion in 22, wasn't he? He's like 5:55. So I'm like, oh, that's good. I know his 2K score for commentary.
Didn't they just?
Yeah, they literally just did them last year. So I used to do them. I used to take part in those, it's annual indoor rowing championships, and that's where the Polish team does their trials. It's like the end of every January, and then all the different groups, juniors, under 23s, etc., they all go to like different bases for training camps.
Yeah,
I think it's brilliant. You get to mix in, you get to see, watch, interact with all those athletes.
Yeah,
I think it's definitely an exciting time for rowing. There's a lot of change happening, and I think you can be annoyed that certain bits are missing, but I think you can just also get excited that other stuff is coming, and better that than lose the whole program together, because we're not making change. But yeah, definitely.
Totally.
I mean, you need to get away, I think, soon. We've been talking for a while.
Oh god.
Yeah.
We just want to ask you some quick fire round questions, because so I'll start with the ones that I normally do, and then I'll do the commentating ones. So out of all the rowing venues that you've trained at, raced at, or visited, what are some of your favourites and why?
Got to be Lucerne. That feels like a spiritual home, coming back there. More so than Henley. I know, we're on the Henley course now, but I think having seen Jim Clark win there, the silver medal in 1974, having raced there loads, having Swiss friends, having done training camps on the Rotsee, it's like the buzz you get walking down that little road, the buzz you get hearing the cowbells ringing, the buzz you get seeing a race come by, and the commentators, sitting on bullshit corner trying to stare at the boats by the reeds, and Nick Katrina comes up.
Where I met you the first time.
Yeah,
2013. I was doing a pair with James Fote.
Oh, I remember.
He came down and said hi, and we had a good chat, and I walked away. And I'd only ever heard you recording before, so when we walked away, James was like, he swears a bit more than on telly, doesn't he?
Yeah. Memorable things. John Garrett and I, we were training in Sabaudia. We were the last to get to the trailer, probably because I was having a coffee in the hotel. All the guys had taken the boats off to the lagoon, which is where you train. Sea was mirror glass, flat, and I'm like to John, do you fancy just paddling on the sea? It's like, oh yeah. So we didn't tell anyone. We just left our training shoes on the beach, and we headed out.
No.
And we basically went out about 5 miles. It's like ludicrous. We just kept paddling, and you had this gentle swell. We were trying to go towards a boat that we thought would get bigger, but it just kept the same. And then we sort of thought, oh shit, we better stop now. And then my top nut is like completely undone. It's like, oh fuck, this could be dangerous. So anyway, we headed back, but rowing on the sea and in Sabaudia like that was a real highlight. I always think of. So I think those two, Barrington was an iconic course, but it doesn't. I've been there once. You run some real shitholes like the docks at Man. You're never going to say Dorney. I've raced on Dorney as a master, but Dorney I don't think does it for anyone. The Moscow Canal, I've only been there once, but it's just like the rowing course.
No, that's good.
Memories. If you were to repeat one race when you're 80, 90, 100, what would it be and why? It could be an event or a race.
Yeah, I think that's really a difficult question, because I try and think you live your life, you get what you're given, and basically make of it what you will. So the sense of going back, if I was to go back, I guess being at 1,000 metres in 1985 with Adam in the pair, seeing the Pimenov stern and thinking, right, fucking hell, we'll go for you now. We'll take the title in the third quarter. That would be tempting.
Tim Foster said it would be the pair with you against the Austrians at Henley.
I'd never won the bloody goblets, and that would be the other one, because the whole thing there was, you're going along and you're so smooth, and then you think, right, better start pushing. When you push, if you don't do it properly, you kind of just tighten up. So we tightened up a bit, and then it takes more stuff out of you. And doing that race again would be, I'd be coming past Remenham, and coming towards the bit between the enclosures, and I would stay loose, and we win then.
That's a good one.
That's a good one. I like a question I like to ask. If you could travel back in time to the age you were when you first really caught the bug for rowing, what advice would you give that kid?
I think in terms of, I love all this stuff that Kath Bishop's putting out about the long win now. I think fundamental is how much fun are you having.
Yeah.
In this sport, how much do you love the sport? Learn to love it. Make sure you have fun. Have fun in the boat. Have fun with the people you're with. Have fun talking about it off the water. But foundational, and where you can avoid this notion that you're sacrificing something to run. That there's all these things that you could be doing if it only wasn't for bloody rowing. Actually, you're privileged to be doing this sport with fantastic people, and hold that. And there's this book called "Do What You Love and the Money Will Follow."
Yeah.
Do what you love and the results will follow.
Yeah, that's great advice. I remember it was from 18 onwards at Leander, and then in the squad. My birthday's the end of January, always on training camp. And I remember I'd wake up and my first thought would be like, it's my birthday and it's training camp. But then also immediately I'd be like, it's your birthday and you're on training camp. And I remember that kind of being a great sort of reminder for me to be like, where else do you want to be right now? Yeah.
Completely agree. That's beautiful advice. I've got a few more just quick questions. One is, who are some of your rowing idols or people you've looked up to during or post your rowing career?
My first rowing hero, as I said, was Jim Clark, teacher. I think anyone in that eight, and they've just started to pass away now. Dave Maxwell, the foreman, just left us. Bob Janicek, I remember the first time he spoke to me, it was like, shit, Bob Janicek, I've heard all these things about. So, they were kind of idols. The stroke of the East German Four that I wrote about in my book, Siegfried Bretzger, because he was the stroke and I was the stroke, and it was just like, I'd seen them winning Lucerne as a schoolboy, and he was a particular hero. Although it's interesting, like latter, I interviewed him for my book. The guy was great because he drove down hundreds of kilometres from the north of Germany to, I think it was Leipzig where we met, his old coach's flat. He didn't really remember me or know who I was. It was kind of like, but I think, he was a very big party guy, potentially Stasi guy as well. So, I don't think it was a happy ending for Siggy when the wall came down. And then I think people like, Nick and Yuri Pimenov, Mike Tatey, again, some of the women like, what's her name? Kathleen Heddle, who was on the Athletes Commission, incredible double Olympic champion, now sadly not with us anymore. You kind of look at her and go like, she's amazing in terms of how she moves, what she does, how she, she's quite introverted in terms of how she talks about what she does. guys that I've written about, someone like Fred Kelly, his name's down here in Leander. 1908, he won the Olympics. I've written about him, a biography type thing. So he's kind of hero.
Mm-hmm.
And when you see, like Ollie Zeidler, it's like, I remember the first time I saw him race, it was Belgrade, and it was a first World Cup, and it was just like, shit, what's that? They're kind of heroic figures. I think the Sinkovich brothers, they're so nice, and they always say hello. They are such amazing people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, that doesn't really, I think Tweller and Broadink are nice guys, but, the Sinkoviches, the way they do coming fourth. These are Olympic champions that come in doing fourth. That they are extraordinarily magnanimous and heroic in any sense of the word. So I could go on.
Yeah,
That's amazing. It's a great list.
I bet. What are some of the best crews that you've seen over the years when you were commentating?
So I think you talked about this with Mike Tatey. So one of the great things that we used to do was just sit down on the grandstand, which would be empty, watching crews paddling by, and like, what's the number one crew you want to watch? And it was always the German 8. It was like front end. It was the paddling, the way they did the catches. I was out with the Hampton First 8 yesterday, and Josh Butler was talking. Like how you get speed of entry without effort of trying, and how you get connected low down. And they had this amazing facility to be so quick. It was like, how do they do that? I still haven't had an answer really about the way that, but I would love to have been able to coach a crew like the German 8. I think, you look at boats from particular eras. So this East German 4 that I talked about, that I raced, again, an amazing crew, row completely differently. I think in terms of British crews, you look at the current British 4, like I think they row the best of any crew.
It's beautiful to watch, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like, I hope I don't jinx them. I hope they win gold in that, that Olympic race. Because
Yeah.
that is the type of rowing that you kind of think, I was never capable of, but it's like beautiful to watch. In their own sense, Murray and Bond. I remember the first time they raced in the World Cup in a pair. I was like, there on the course, watching it. They raced Hodge and Reed. It's like, both of them are like macho going out to 500. It's like, but Hodge and Reed thought they'd lead him. Like Murray and Bond were like, well, because normally they didn't lead a fight. They were quite happy not. But that race against Hodge and Reed, they were like, okay, so you want us to do 134 to a 500. So we'll put out 134 and leash it. And they won that heat. And, they obviously were unbeaten in terms of a run. So you kind of get that sense of, special. They were always incredibly special to see. And I think, a quad scull, love watching Italian quad scull. Really amazing. I don't understand how the Dutch quad scull are so fast. I don't mean particularly the 2023 version, but I mean the 2020 version, the 2021 version. It's just like, to watch that was incredible. I think because I've done a quad scull and I've never been particularly fast in it. So those are some of the examples.
No, that sounds good. Who are some of your favourite co-commentators? Or like a favourite co-commentator too?
I love working with Greg Searle because Greg, I do all the preparation, I won't say all the hard work. Greg can do really touchy-feely, and he really helps coach me along. So, if I'm at the extent of putting too much information in there, at the expense of talking about what's actually going on. We had this kind of really good debrief, like day one in Munich at the Europeans in 22 was, I think, okay, quite good. Day two, it was like we talked after he said, it's too much inflation. We're not going with, what we're seeing. So I think because Greg coaches me,
Yeah.
almost, which is interesting, because I remember teaching Greg as a little first year.
That's crazy. Yeah.
I rode with him in the same crew. The commentators I've worked with, I've said earlier, but Cookie she's amazing to work with. So buzzy, so knowledgeable. Camilla Hadland is fantastic too. But for me, I think the ability for someone to help me get the best out of myself, which is I think what Greg does, is amazing.
That sounds great. Thank you so much, Martin. This chat has been so fantastic. I mean, it's absolutely fascinating to hear your rowing story, go into so much depth, and it's rowing. I mean, we could go on for hours and not run out of things to talk about. Like at some point, we'd obviously love to have you on again, and please keep commentating, keep making the racing so exciting to watch, and just looking forward to also hearing what you're gonna have to say at this year's racing too. So also, best of luck with Crossy's Corner.
Thanks, Peter and Tom.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's been amazing. I mean, I think, when we first started doing this, I don't think we ever imagined we'd be able to sit down with people like you. And I think hearing about your career is incredible. I think probably like all international athletes, you put yourself down quite well. But, from our perspective, having heard all that, I think it's incredible. And, even just thinking about you sort of saying that you were a different level to the people you won gold with, yet, when the plan all went to shit at 500, you were the guy that took the reins. And hearing things like that should sort of, I'm sure everyone else will see that, it's incredible everything that you've done and what you've done for the sport and continue to do. And just really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you.
That concludes everything for today's episode. So on that note, easy there.
Cue the music.